Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle. Now 4th of October 2020 has been scheduled for UPSC prelims examination, and I hope all of you must be prepared for the D-Day. However, as a last time revision, you can attempt our All India Free Full Length Test titled as Pre-Parikshan 2020. Now the first test has already been done. Now I hope most of you have appeared for this test. And those of you who have not appeared for the test dated 20th September, you can appear for the test on 25th September 2020. Now this test not only helps to evaluate your understanding so far, but also gives you a glimpse of diversified topics which might be asked in the upcoming prelims examination on 4th of October 2020. So take the step forward and register yourself on elearn.raoias.com and appear for this test, not only as a moral booster but also to know the different aspects or also to understand the different diversified topics which becomes important from your exam perspective. So with respect to your prelims on 4th October 2020, all the very best from Rao's IAS Study Circle. And with respect to Pre-Parikshan 2020, please appear this test scheduled on 25th September 2020. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading from your UPSC perspective. Now today we shall discuss the important news which has appeared in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 21st September 2020. The news to be discussed has been displayed on your screen and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So on this note, let's start our today's discussion from our examination perspective. The first news to be discussed appears on page number 1. It says, Government tables a bill to amend FCRA. In a bid to enhance transparency, it will make Aadhaar mandatory. So the government has proposed the Foreign Contribution Regulation Amendment Bill of 2020 to amend certain provisions of the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act of 2010. Now, in our previous discussion dated 13th September 2020, we have already discussed in detail about FCRA and also various provisions with respect to FCRA along with the important Supreme Court judgment. So here in this discussion, let us understand the reason as to why the government has brought this particular amendment to FCRA of 2010. Now, one of the major problems highlighted in their statement of object and reason of this bill is that the government has been worried not because of doubling of annual flow of foreign contribution, but because of the fact that these amounts are not utilized by the organizations or NGOs who are receiving such funds. So the statement of object and reasons of this particular bill highlights that the annual flow of foreign contribution has almost doubled between the years 2010 and 2019. However, this is not the problem. The bill says that many recipients of these foreign contribution have not utilized this amount for the purpose for which they were registered or for the purpose for which they were granted prior permission under the FCRA. So the amount which these organizations or NGOs are receiving, they are not utilizing for the purpose for which such amount was sanctioned by the government. So the government thinks that the recipients of these foreign contributions have not utilized the money which was transferred to them for the particular purpose for which license was granted under FCRA. The second reason highlighted here is that these organizations who receive foreign contribution do not submit annual returns or do not even maintain proper accounts. So in this regard, the statement of object and reason mentions that many of these organizations were also found wanting in ensuring basic statutory compliances, that is, compliances provided under law, such as submission of annual returns as well as maintenance of proper accounts. So this is also one of the reasons why the government has proposed this amendment under the FCRA of 2010. So the government highlights that both these aspects of not utilization of money for which it was sanctioned and non-compliance of statutory law, especially with respect to annual returns as well as maintenance of proper accounts, this has led to a situation where the central government had to cancel certificates of registration of more than 19,000 recipient organizations including NGOs during the period between 2011 and 2019. Further, the government also mentions that even criminal investigations have been initiated against some of these organizations. The object highlights that even criminal investigations were initiated against some of the organization which indulged in outright misappropriation or misutilization of foreign contribution. So there was another aspect of misutilization or misappropriation of foreign contribution. And because of this, central government not only had to cancel these licenses or certificates granted under FCRA, but also had to initiate criminal investigations against such organizations or NGOs. So the government says that in order to streamline the provisions of the said act, that is FCRA 2010, the government intends to strengthen compliance mechanism, and the government also aims to enhance transparency and accountability with respect to maintenance of receipt and also with respect to use of foreign funding by such organizations. So here the statement of object and reason says that there is a need to streamline the provisions of FCRA 2010 by strengthening the compliance mechanism, enhancing transparency and accountability in the receipt and utilization of foreign contributions worth thousands of crores every year, and also facilitating genuine non-governmental organizations or associations who are working for the welfare of the society. So these are the reasons why the government has initiated the 2020 amendment with respect to the Foreign Contribution Act of 2010. So after understanding the reason as to why the government has initiated this amendment, let us go through some of the important amendments as provided under the 2020 bill. So the first amendment is with respect to inclusion of the term public servant under section 3 of FCRA. Now we have earlier seen in detail about section 3, as section 3 of FCRA mentions about prohibition to accept foreign contribution, that is such organizations or such entities who are not allowed to accept foreign contribution, and among them even public servants shall be added. Now to understand the second amendment, let us take up this example. Suppose organization ABC has been allowed to obtain foreign funding. So suppose ABC has obtained 100 crores as foreign funding, and out of this 100 crore it transfers 20 crore to XYZ organization, that is some other organization who had not been allowed by the Ministry of Home Affairs to receive any foreign funding. Now this aspect was prohibited under section 7 of FCRA 2010. However, such transfer was allowed with prior approval from the central government. So in this regard, the government has proposed an amendment to section 7 of FCRA 2010 to prohibit any transfer of foreign contribution to other person or association. So section 7 of FCRA 2010 mentions about prohibition to transfer foreign contributions to other persons. It says that no person who is registered and granted a certificate or has obtained prior permission under this act and receives any foreign contribution shall transfer such foreign contribution to any other person unless such other person is also registered and has been granted the certificate or obtained prior permission under this act. So here in this example, what we had tried to highlight or understand is that ABC was the organization which was allowed license or prior permission from the Ministry of Home Affairs to obtain foreign funding. However, the organization XYZ was not allowed to obtain foreign funding. However, what ABC did was, after obtaining certain amount of foreign funding, it transferred a part of the amount to this other organization XYZ, which did not obtain any permission from Ministry of Home Affairs to take foreign contribution. So it is here where section 7 prohibits such transfer of foreign contribution to other person or organization. However, there was another part of section 7 which allowed such transfer only if the central government allowed or agreed. It says that provided that such person may transfer with the prior approval of the central government a part of such foreign contribution. So the government aims to amend this aspect which was provided under section 7. So now the new section 7 as proposed in this bill reads, no person who is registered and granted a certificate or has obtained prior permission under this act and receives any foreign contribution shall transfer such foreign contribution to any other person. Now to understand the next amendment, first of all let us understand the meaning of the term defray. Defray means to provide money to pay expenses, and here it has amended section 8 where it says to reduce the limit of defraying, that is reduce the limit of providing money to pay expenses, especially with respect to administrative expenses, and this amount has been reduced, that is providing money to pay administrative expenses has been reduced from the existing 50% to 20%, as provided under subsection 1 of section 8 of FCRA. The bill aims to insert a new section, namely section 12A, and this empowers the central government to require Aadhaar number for identification document. So here Aadhaar details of all office bearers or directors or key functionaries of such organizations would be required as a identification document. So the act says that any person who seeks prior permission or prior approval shall provide as identification document the Aadhaar number of all its office bearers or director or other key functionaries, or a copy of the passport or overseas citizen of India card in case of a foreigner. So this is what section 12A highlights. And lastly, it provides amendment of section 17 of FCRA 2010. And as per this amendment, every person who has been granted certificate or prior permission shall receive foreign contribution only in an account designated as FCRA account. So in order to receive foreign funding, the government has designated this account as FCRA account, which shall be opened by such person in such branch of SBI at New Delhi as the government may specify through a notification. So providing a separate FCRA account will enhance monitoring of receiving foreign fundings by the government. And through enhanced monitoring, the government will have a better idea as to what amount of foreign fundings are coming within the country and how much amount is being utilized, as these organizations have to maintain proper accounts as per the Ministry of Home Affairs. So these are some of the important amendments provided through the Foreign Contribution Regulation Amendment Bill of 2020. Now, as mentioned earlier, this topic becomes important both from the perspective of prelims as well as mains examination, and again questions may be asked with respect to various aspects of FCRA and even on Foreign Contribution Regulation Amendment Bill of 2020. And this topic has been covered in detail in the DNS dated 13 September 2020. So to go into the basics of FCRA, please go through this DNS dated 13 September 2020, which has been covered few days back. Now this topic gets covered under Indian Polity and Governance in your prelims examination, and in your mains gets covered under GS paper 3 as well as GS paper 2. Under GS paper 3, it gets covered under challenges to internal security as well as money laundering and its prevention. And under GS paper 2, it gets covered under development process with respect to role of NGOs, SHGs, various groups and associations, donors, charities, institutional and other stakeholders. So with this discussion, let's move on to the next news analysis. The next news to be discussed appears on page number 1 and also as a continuation on page number 8. It says, make ethics code must for all news channels. NBA, that is News Broadcaster Association, tells Supreme Court in its affidavit. It says that broadcasters' body responds to court order on self-regulation. So this particular news is with respect to the restraint order which the Supreme Court has given to Sudarshan News to broadcast its program titled Bindas. Now the Supreme Court, while hearing the matter on Sudarshan News, said that there is a need to balance right to freedom of speech and expression as well as human dignity. That is, one cannot override the other, or in other terms, right to freedom of speech and expression cannot be used to violate basic norms of human dignity. That is, right to freedom of speech and expression cannot be used as a tool to violate human dignity. So it is in this backdrop that News Broadcaster Association has highlighted certain measures with respect to strengthening self-regulation. So in this backdrop, there are few things which we must understand both from the prelims as well as mains perspective, especially in the backdrop of right to freedom of speech and expression. First is with respect to self-regulation by news broadcasters. Next is with respect to prior restraint. Now, prior restraint simply means restraining or preventing telecast of any program before its official release. Now, this is a very sensitive issue and the Supreme Court applies the proximity principle. That is, it has to be judged objectively that whether such freedom of speech and expression disturbs public order or it can lead to incitement to offense. And if that is the case, only then the Supreme Court can go for prior restraint by applying the proximity principle. So, with respect to regulation of such broadcast, there are two aspects here. One is prior restraint, that is, restraining the telecast even before its official release, and second is restraining the telecast after airing of the news or any program by the particular channel. And it is here where self-regulation and code of ethics to be followed comes into picture, which the NBA had stated in its affidavit and has also told the Supreme Court to strengthen the regulation with respect to broadcasting of such content which may violate human dignity or which may lead to disturbance of public order or incitement to an offense. So it is in this backdrop that you need to know about News Broadcaster Association as well as News Broadcasters Services Authority. Now both these are private entities and does not function under any of the Ministry of Government of India. As you can see that News Broadcaster Association represents the private television news and current affairs broadcasters. It is a collective voice of the news and current affairs broadcasters in India, and it is an organization funded entirely by its members. It further says that NBA has presently 26 leading news and current affairs broadcasters. And NBA presents a unified and credible voice before the government on matters which affects this particular industry. Now, with respect to National Broadcaster Services Authority, it highlights that the object of this authority is to lay down and foster high standards, ethics, and practices in news broadcasting, including entertaining and deciding complaints against or in respect of broadcasters. It further says that NBSA also administers the Code of Ethics and Broadcasting Standards, which has been voluntarily drawn by the News Broadcasters Association for its member broadcasters to demonstrate. So the Code of Ethics and Broadcasting Standards on self-regulation by media outlet includes impartiality and objectivity in reporting of news, ensuring neutrality in airing news, ensuring that reporting on crime does not glorify such crime or any kind of violence, avoiding depiction of violence against women and children, not to show sex or nudity through news channels, ensure right to privacy of citizens, and not to interfere in their areas of privacy. Further, use of news channels should not endanger national security. News channels should refrain from advocating or encouraging superstition or occultism. Further, it also highlights about sting operation. It says that sting operation should be used only as a last resort to reveal any information for the viewers, and if any mistakes are made in the course of broadcast by any news channel, then such mistakes must be acknowledged and corrected on air. And lastly, it says that all news channels must provide mechanism to obtain customer feedback and ensure appropriate response is applied in case of any complaints which they have received. So these are some of the Code of Ethics and Broadcasting Standards on self-regulation by media outlets. So the NBA in its affidavit to Supreme Court has said to make this code a statutory binding code or a legally binding code so that its compliance can be ensured legally. And it is here where the role of NBSA becomes very crucial. So considering these aspects, let us go through some of the important measures which has been suggested by News Broadcaster Association in the Supreme Court of India in the backdrop of Sudarshan News case. First, it says that this code of ethics should be applicable to all news channels, irrespective of the fact whether such news channels are members of NBA or not. Secondly, it highlights about bringing Code of Ethics of NBA within the Program Code of Cable Television Networks Rules of 1994 of the Government of India, as this will ensure legal compliance of the Code of Ethics by all news channels, irrespective of whether they are members of NBA or not. So basically, to make this Code of Ethics legally binding on all news channels. Third, to recognize National Broadcaster Services Authority as an independent self-regulatory mechanism so that it can not only receive and deal with complaints but also ensure compliance with its judgments. But for that, it has to make NBSA a legally recognized body. Further, it says that orders passed by NBSA needs to be binding and enforceable. So this fourth point is in line with the third point, as it will ensure complying of such orders of NBSA And also, recognition to NBSA would further strengthen news broadcasting standards regulation. And lastly, or the fifth point, it says that penalizing derogatory or communal content if it is aired on television. So here the NBA has suggested the Supreme Court to take steps to strengthen the self-regulatory mechanism to prevent or penalize airing of communal or derogatory content on electronic media. So these are some of the measures which has been suggested by News Broadcasters Association in the present Supreme Court case, which is currently going on. Now, in this present case, Supreme Court said that NBA is toothless, and it is in this regard that role of NBA should be strengthened by the government. So here we have highlighted certain problems, especially with respect to News Broadcasters Association. First is that it does not have any statutory or a legal backing, and this becomes one of the major problem here, as self-regulation hardly works. Second, as mentioned by the Supreme Court, it is almost a toothless body without adequate powers, and at the max it can impose a penalty of rupees 1 lakh only. And this provision of penalty of maximum of rupees 1 lakh does not act as any actual deterrence for the news channels. Another problem is that such channels who are not members of NBA does not come within the fold of NBA. So the government needs to ensure such a legal mechanism that all news channels, irrespective of the fact that they are members of NBA or not, should come within its code of ethics. And lastly, the aspect of self-regulation of media by itself is not working, as it is against one of the principles of rule of law, that is, no one should be a judge in their own case. Now, another problem here is that this self-regulation is not working because some of the channels are airing these sensitive issues pertaining to regionalism as well as communalism. So these can be said to be some of the problems with respect to News Broadcaster Association in the present time. So in this matter, since the case is sub judice or is pending in the Supreme Court, let us wait for the final outcome of this very important case which is going on in the Supreme Court of India, especially with respect to right to freedom of speech and expression and also right to human dignity. Now the next news of discussion of this lead article on page number 6 is a follow-up of the previous discussion. It says that define the contours of hate in speech. The Sudarshan News case is a chance to infuse clarity on offensive speech, hate speech, and exceptional cases where prior restraint can be applied by the Supreme Court. So here in this regard, the author says that it is time that in this present case, the Supreme Court must clarify the difference between offensive speech and hate speech, and also ensure that when prior restraint can be applied, that is, whether prior restraint can be applied in case of an offensive speech or in case of a hate speech. So in order to do that, the Supreme Court has to differentiate very clearly between offensive speech as well as hate speech. So with respect to the definition of hate speech or the important ingredients of hate speech, the author in this article has mentioned about the definition provided by Professor Jeremy Waldron, where the professor has provided the definition of hate speech and has said that merely offensive speech or statements should not qualify as hate speech. So in Professor Waldron's definition, hate speech involves incitement to violence, hatred, or discrimination against people on the basis of collective identity. Now here the term collective identity is important, and this collective identity can be on grounds of race, ethnicity, religion, gender, or sexuality. So the author says that as per Professor Waldron's definition, hate speech refers to utterances that incite violence, hatred, or discrimination against people on the basis of their collective identity. And this collective identity can be on grounds of race, ethnicity, religion, gender, or sexuality. Further, the professor also says that a merely offensive statement would not qualify as hate speech, and here he has given certain example. He says that, for example, a mockery of Buddhist tenets would not be illegal simply because it offends the sensibilities of its practitioners. However, speech that describes all Buddhists as amoral would qualify as hate speech, and this is because this is a statement based on their collective identity. Another example highlighted here is that a work of satire on a religious figure which outrages the sentiments of their followers will be safeguarded as per the definition of Professor Waldron. However, such speech that vilifies an entire community, again, the concept of a collective identity comes into picture here. By describing the entire community as anti national, would be categorized as hate speech and would go unprotected. That is, such statement which vilifies an entire community being described as anti national cannot be said to be mere offensive speech, but it shall be considered as hate speech. Now, the professor highlights about two important aspects here. First is equal dignity to all, and the second is inclusiveness in the society. So, hate speech is an attack on both these aspects. That is, hate speech violates equal dignity to all and also the idea of inclusiveness. So, it is here where the author says that Professor Waldron's definition of hate speech fits perfectly into the Indian democratic principles or fit perfectly into the Indian democratic aspects, especially with respect to liberty, equality, and fraternity, as these are the important ideals which has also been highlighted in the preamble to the Indian Constitution. As you can see, the term liberty, equality, as well as fraternity has been mentioned in the preamble to the Indian Constitution. With respect to liberty, it says liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all, and fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. So we understand that the term liberty, equality, and fraternity are an important aspect of democratic values which the constitution makers has ensured that it becomes part of the preamble when they included it within the preamble to the Indian Constitution. Now, the author has highlighted in this article that Section 153A and 295A of the Indian Penal Code describes about certain elements of hate speech. However, the definition is not very much clear, and it is here where the Supreme Court in the present judgment can provide more clarity with respect to the definition of hate speech. Now, as you can see that Section 153A provides for promoting enmity between different groups on grounds of religion, race, place of birth, residence, language, etc., and doing acts prejudicial to maintenance of harmony. And any person who is indulged in such activities shall be punished with imprisonment, which may extend to 3 years or with fine or with both. So, an aspect of collective identity can be found in the definition provided under Section 153A of Indian Penal Code. Similarly, Section 295A mentions about deliberate and malicious acts intended to outrage religious feelings of any class by insulting its religion or religious beliefs. However, the author says that outrightly both these provisions, that is Section 295A as well as Section 153A of Indian Penal Code, does not outrightly or explicitly mentions about hate speech. And it is here where the Supreme Court has an opportunity to describe hate speech. And it is in this regard where the author has concluded by saying that once Supreme Court has clarified the ingredients with respect to hate speech, then in such case it will become easier for the courts to issue prior restraint if any of the ingredients of any telecast can be categorized as hate speech. Now, with respect to application of hate speech, another important aspect is with respect to reasonable restrictions provided under Article 19 Clause 2. And here the author has mentioned about two important aspects. First is with respect to disturbance of public order, and second is with respect to morality. But here the author has mentioned about constitutional morality and not societal morality. So this aspect must be understood very clearly. So the author says that with respect to disturbance of public order, the speech must reach a level of incitement to be criminalized. That is, the utterance of such hate speech will lead to incitement of offense and also disturbance of public order. And the second aspect highlighted by the author is that reimagination of our hate speech laws. And it is here where the author says that the role of Supreme Court becomes very important. Now, another aspect of reasonable restriction is morality. But according to the author, this morality should be that of constitutional morality. So it says that speech that merely causes offense and is no more than disparaging or unpleasant would continue to remain shielded. That is, such speech shall be categorized as offensive speech, but not hate speeches. But such speech that treats communities with disparate concern by creating in them a sense of dread, a sense of exclusion from civic life, will go unprotected. That is, such speech shall be categorized as hate speech. As such speech invoke the idea or vilify collective identity of any group. So these are some of the aspects which have been highlighted in this present article. And lastly, the authors have mentioned about prior restraint. And in this regard, the author says that the Supreme Court must order to draft such an ethics code, which we have seen in the previous news discussion, to bind it to all legitimate norms of constitutional rights under Part 3. That is, the author wants to make the ethics code legally binding, and failure of such would also amount to violation of fundamental rights, especially with respect to freedom of speech and expression. Further, the author says that it is here where the Supreme Court can frame guidelines, especially with respect to application of prior restraint on such speech, which can be qualified as hate speech. And the Supreme Court can categorize or list important ingredients which must be present to differentiate between offensive speech as well as hate speech. So, this is what the author in this particular lead article has tried to explain. Now, both the second and the third news becomes important both from the prelims as well as mains perspective. In our mains, it gets covered under GS paper 2, especially with respect to important features of Indian Constitution. And in our prelims, it gets covered under Indian polity and governance. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news to be discussed appears on page number 13. It says United States says that UN sanctions on Iran back in force. However, others disagree. France, Britain, and Germany say that the move lacks legal basis. Even Russia does not approve of this move of United States. Now, this particular news is with respect to the Iranian nuclear deal, that is JCPOA. So, this becomes important from our prelims perspective as certain important aspects can be asked in the upcoming examination, especially with respect to Iran nuclear deal. Now, the Iran nuclear deal is also referred as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action or JCPOA, and it is an agreement on the Iranian nuclear program which was reached in Vienna in 2015 between Iran and P5 plus 1 countries. Now, P5 here refers to the permanent 5 members of the United Nations Security Council, which includes United States, Britain, France, China, as well as Russia. And plus 1 here is Germany. And this deal was reached along with the European Union. So even EU was involved in JCPOA. Now, another important aspect is that compliance of norms by Iran shall be verified by IAEA, that is, International Atomic Energy Agency. Now, the problem which happened was that in 2018, the United States administration backed out of JCPOA. However, recently the United States unilaterally have proclaimed that the UN sanctions against Iran were back in force, and this aspect has been referred in the news as snapback. Now, snapback was a mechanism which was devised by US negotiating team before the signing of JCPOA, which stipulated that if Iran breached its commitments with respect to IAEA, then all international sanctions could snap back into place. So based on this aspect of snapback, United States unilaterally has proclaimed that UN sanctions against Iran are back in force. However, this step of the US is not supported by other members of JCPOA. Other members says that there is no legal backing for the United States to say so, and the member of the Security Council disputes US ability to execute this legal step, that is the step of a snapback. It says that France and Britain have also issued a joint statement along with non-permanent member Germany, and they collectively have said that US notification was incapable of having any legal effect. Even Russia's foreign ministry have said that US statements lacked legal authority, and the legal authority is with respect to JCPOA or Iran nuclear deal. So you must read this news from the perspective of your prelims, especially with respect to JCPOA Iran nuclear deal. And you should know the members who were involved in JCPOA. Further, you should also know about IAEA, that is International Atomic Energy Agency. Now, with respect to the map, you must know that Iran opens to both Caspian Sea as well as Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman. And this is the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Iran borders primarily with Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan on the east, whereas Iraq and Turkey on the west, and Armenia, Azerbaijan, as well as Turkmenistan in the north. Now, with respect to Iran, you must know the location of some of the sites of nuclear plants which are covered under the nuclear deal. Now, in Bushehr, it is a nuclear power plant, whereas in Natanz, it's a uranium enrichment facility, whereas in Arak, it is a heavy water reactor, and in Fordo, it is again a uranium enrichment facility. So, these are some of the important sites with respect to nuclear facilities in Iran. So we understand that this news becomes important from the perspective of international relation as well as world map with respect to your world geography. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news to be discussed appears on page number 8. It says, a neglected temple's transition over the centuries. Kakati Devi temple built by Ganapati Deva was converted into a abode of a local goddess. Now with respect to this particular news, you need to know about the Kakatiya dynasty. So, the Kakatiya dynasty or the Kakatiyas were descendants of Karikala Chola king of Durjaya clan, who initially started as vassals of the Chalukyas in India and later they emerged as a ruling dynasty with the capital at Kakatipura, which is the present day Warangal. So here you need to know that Kakatiya dynasty is around the Telangana region and their capital was Warangal. Now with respect to Warangal fort, it says that this fort appears to have existed since at least 12th century when it was the capital of Kakatiya dynasty. Further, it highlights about the Warangal fort that the fort has 4 ornamental gates known as Kakatiya Kala Thoranam, which originally formed the entrances to a now ruined great Shiva temple. Now with respect to Kakatiya dynasty, you must know that its capital was around Warangal and it was situated around the river Krishna, and it was also a contemporary of Delhi Sultanate. Now this aspect has been taken from NCERT, and this highlights about the inscription on coins by Razia Sultan and also by one of the ruler from Kakatiya dynasty. Now this extract highlights that on her inscription and coins, Razia mentioned that she was the daughter of Sultan Iltutmish, and this was in contrast to Queen Rudrama Devi of the Kakatiya dynasty of Warangal, which is part of modern Andhra Pradesh. It says that Rudrama Devi changed her name on her inscriptions and pretended she was a man. So these can be said to be some of the important highlights with respect to difference in inscription by Razia Sultan and by Rudrama Devi, who was the queen of Kakatiya dynasty and was also a contemporary of Delhi Sultanate. Now this news also highlights about the reign of Ganapati Deva between 1199 and 1262. It says that he expanded the Kakatiya lands during the 1230s when he launched a series of attacks outside the dynasty's traditional Telangana region and thereby brought under Kakatiya control the Telugu speaking lowland delta areas around the Godavari and Krishna rivers. So this again become an important point from your prelims point of view. It further says that he organized the building of massive granite wall around the city, complete with ramps designed for ease of access to its ramparts from within. Further, he showed keen interest to improve the dynasty's economy and encouraged merchants to trade abroad, and also abolished all taxes except for a fixed duty, and also supported those who risked their lives to travel far away. And he also created the man-made Pakhal Lake. Further, it says that Ganpati Deva is the first king who introduced the worship of Kakati Devi in the coastal region of Andhra. And after successfully annexing the Andhra region into the kingdom of Kakatiya, Ganapati Deva made matrimonial alliances with Kota chiefs of Dharani Kota region. And on the occasion of the marriage of his daughter, Ganapati Deva constructed a temple and sanctified the limestone idol of Kakati Devi as the presiding deity for his daughter to worship. So these can be said to be some of the important highlights with respect to Kakatiya kingdom under Ganapati Deva reign. Thus, this topic from your prelims point of view becomes important with respect to Indian history and culture. Now, the next news to be discussed appears on page number 1 and also on page number 6. The news says, amid fierce protest, Raj Sabha passes two farm bills. However, these bills have been opposed by the opposition parties. They have said that government should send them to select committee for scrutiny, say opposition parties. And this article is also in the same regard. It says that it's a no green signal from the farm world. There is good reason why opposition to the agriculture bills may be a reflection of the genuine concerns of farmers. Now, this topic has been covered in detail by Baswa sir in the DNS dated 17 September 2020, as this particular DNS has covered various aspects and concerns relating to these agricultural bills. Now, the main provision with respect to these two bills have been highlighted in the PIB, that is Press Information Bureau. It says that these new legislations will create an ecosystem where the farmers and traders will enjoy freedom of choice of sale and purchase of agri produce. It says that these bills will help to promote barrier free interstate and intrastate trade, that is within the state and among different states, and commerce outside the physical premises of markets notified under state agricultural produce marketing legislations. It further says that the farmers will not be charged any cess or levy for sale of their produce and will not have to bear transport cost. The bill also proposes an electronic trading in transaction platform to ensure a seamless trade electronically. And in addition to mandis, there is also freedom to do trading at farm gate, cold storage, warehouse, processing units, etc. And farmers will be able to engage in direct marketing, thereby eliminating intermediaries, which will ultimately result in full realization of farm prices. So these can be said to be the main provisions with respect to these two bills as has been highlighted on the Press Information Bureau. To go through the important highlights and concerns, you can go through the DNS dated 17 September 2020, which has been discussed in detail by Baswa sir. Now, after our discussion, this becomes your practice question for the day. The question is, consider the following statements. Iran nuclear deal is also referred as Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Second, the deal was reached between Iran and P5+1 together with European Union. So the question is, which of the statements given above are correct? Options are A, 1 only, B, 2 only, C, both 1 and 2, and D, neither 1 nor 2. Now coming to the answer of yesterday, the question was, consider the following substance. First, iron. Second, water. Third, hematite. And fourth, molecular oxygen. So the question was, which of the above is found on the surface of the moon? Of these, molecular oxygen is not found on the surface of the moon. So here the correct answer becomes B, that is 1, 2 and 3 only. With this, we come to an end to today's discussion. Thank you.